Okay.
Okay.
What is your name?
My name is Celia Mittleman. I'm 95 years old. I was born in 1914 in a small town called Simferopol in Russia on the Crimean Peninsula, in a very small town that was just a village. There were no markets. There was a public market where the local farmers brought in their produce, but there were no markets or stores the way that we know them. And the only form of transportation was horse and buggy. There were railroads and automobiles in metropolitan areas, but not in the area in which I lived. And I never saw a train until I was 6 years old. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah. What was different about your homeland in America?
Pardon me?
What was different about your homeland and and the difference between your homeland and America?
Well, my parents decided to leave Russia because World War I was going on, and there were many dangerous things going on, and so they and a number of other young families decided that it would be best with their young children to leave and go to a safer place. And I was 6 at the time, and I was sad to leave my country. I didn't want to leave my grandparents. I didn't want to leave my familiar home, but they said it would be wonderful because if you wanted a light, all you had to do was touch a switch. We had just candlelight and lanterns. And there were all kinds of wonderful, marvelous things in America. And so that made me feel pretty excited. And I was looking forward to those wonderful, marvelous things.
Why did you leave America?
You're holding that up by your mouth and I can't.
Sweetheart, why don't you let me hold it so you can look at her while you talk,
Well,
okay?
I can't figure out what you're saying
Yeah.
exactly.
It's a video camera, it's not a tape recorder. Let me do this part and you look at Grandma so you can hear her. Okay? I want you to be able to hear her.
Oh,
No, you look at her.
oh, okay.
Sorry.
Why did you leave America?
She didn't leave America. Try it again.
Why did I leave America? I never left America. I came to
Why,
America.
why did you come to America?
Happy holidays.
Because the World War I was going on, and Russia and the Allied was with the Allied forces that were fighting the Germans. And the Germans were in our area, and it seemed very dangerous. So my parents and other young families decided that they had better leave because the war was coming too close. Okay. That was the main reason.
Who did you come to America with?
My parents were young. They were in their early 20s, and I had a sister who was 2 years older than I was, and that's who I came with.
How did you get to America? Like abroad?
The hard way. It's very difficult. We took a boat to Constantinople, Turkey, and we were in the steerage at the bottom of the boat. I can still see it clearly. And my mother had packed up all of her household goods, including pillows and quilts and cooking utensils and a rolling pin, and got it all packaged up together, trying to move as much of her household as she could to the new country. And they actually thought that they were going to be going to Palestine. That was before Israel, the state of Israel came into being. But they thought they were headed for Palestine. But when they got to Constantinople in Turkey, they found out that the money that they had brought with them, which was unfortunately paper money, was worthless outside of Russia. It was not worth anything. So they did not have enough money to continue the journey, and they had to remain in Turkey, in Constantinople, where my parents went to an agency called HIAS, H-I-A-S, which was set up to help Jewish immigrants who were stranded. And they put us up in the immigrant hotel. And they got busy trying to find my mother's family. My mother had 6 brothers, all in the United States, who had left the country earlier, before the World War I started. And so what they hoped was that they could find her brothers and they could advance the money for us to continue the rest of the journey. And that's why we were stuck in Constantinople for 6 months, waiting for money to come, just to continue. In the meantime, we had no money. The organization that put us in this hotel, they didn't expect any rent, but they didn't provide any food. So we were pretty hungry. Sometimes we didn't have anything at all to eat. And while we were there, unhappily, my mother had to go to the hospital for a week. And when she came back, we were very excited, of course, to see her. And she wanted some tea. Russians love tea. So she wanted tea. And my sister, who was 8, I was 6, and she was 8, said she knew where to get tea if they would give her some money. So they gave her some coins, and she was very excited, and she dashed out to get the tea, and it was across a very busy street. This hotel was on one of the main streets in Istanbul, Constantinople, and the traffic was very heavy, and there were automobiles and streetcars in this big city. There were none in the town that we came from, but they were in this big city. And she dashed out into the street, apparently, like kids sometimes do without looking good. She didn't know how to cross the street, really. And she got hit by a car, and she was killed. But it's that part of the story. Okay, so then there was the 3 of us. We just had one hotel room. It was my mother was a very smart lady. She was really bright. And she made arrangements with a bakery that was downstairs of the building. I used to see the bakers when they came up to cool off. We lived on the second floor of this hotel, and they would come up to the roof of the building that they were in, which was next door, and they were all covered with flour. They were in their shirts, you know. They were so warm, they come up to cool off on that. Of course, I remember them. She made arrangements with the bakers there that if she made up some pastries, they would let her use their ovens, and she would pay them for that. She was a very good cook and baker. So she started making all this stuff on the bed in this little hotel room. The bed was her kitchen. And she would roll out all this flour, and she knew how to make the kinds of pastries that they liked. And what was very common, and still is, when I visited Turkey several years ago, there are many street vendors, people that sell stuff in the street, but in Constantinople at that time, they were just all over the place. Women stay at home in this Islamic country. They're not out on the street, but the streets are swarming with men. And they sit in cafes, and they smoke, and they play cards and all that. And they're out on the street a lot, and they buy food on the street. And the vendors carry the food mostly in big platters balanced on their head.
Like Brazil.
And that's how the streets are full of those vendors. They still are today. So what she did was partner up with another immigrant who was stranded, younger than she, and quite nice looking. And she was the salesperson. My mother baked all this stuff and piled it onto a huge platter and put it on top of the head of this lady who would go out and sell and bring back some money. And that was how come we didn't starve to death. Because before she started to do this, we didn't have anything to eat. We were there were times when we were very hungry. We didn't have any food. So that enabled us to survive. And I remember Turkey. I remember that street very well, and I remember going out. The streets were, that was a wide boulevard that we were on, but streets tended to be quite narrow and windy, and there were lots of camels. And the men bore huge burdens on their back, just like beasts of burden. They had these huge things piled up on their back that they would carry. Or else they would, the luckier ones, I guess, had camels that they could pile the stuff up. But much of stuff was transported by men, piling things up on their back and running through the streets. And I remember the cobblestones, and I especially remember the camels because it got so close to them. I was afraid they'd spit on me. And somebody had told me that if a camel spits on you, you can never wash it off. You know how it is when you're a kid and you believe what you hear?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very much in conflict. I really wanted that camel to spit on me so I could find out if I could wash it off or not. I tried to provoke the camel, but he didn't spit. But that kind of worried me. And finally, enough money came so that we could get on a train. And I remember we went to a city in France called Marseille, which is also a port city. But on the way there, we went through Paris. And I remember on the way to the train station that we were transported in a very pretty horse and buggy. And that it was so pretty because the main street in the city of Paris, the Champs-Élysées, it's called, that has the Tower of Triumph. Have you ever seen that in history book? Well, there's a big thing called the
Arch.
Called the Tower of Triumph. And the Champs-Élysées is world famous for its beauty. And there were gas lights, no electric lights, gas lights on the street. And this very pretty carriage, and horse, that took us to the railway station, where we had to spend the night, I think, parked out on the steps, waiting for our train. My mother had packed pillows and quilts, and that came in handy, because we had those with us. So we were able to spread out some quilts, I remember that, and some pillows, and sleep at the station on the stairs until our train came. And then we took that train and we went to Marseille. And we were stuck there for 3 months.
Wow.
Waiting for what? For money from America, from my uncles, from our brothers. We were out of money. And so it took about 3 months. And I didn't mind that so much because I loved the French bread. oh my goodness, it was so wonderful. They carried around in the street, these long, I guess, was the most wonderful bread and butter. And I think that's what we lived on pretty much, was fresh bread and butter. Pretty much our diet. And one day, one of the other immigrants, they had a daughter that was considerably older than me. I was 6 and she was probably 12 or something like that. But we used to play together. And so she and her parents took me along on a little trip that they made into town or anything. And they didn't tell anybody. And when we came back, my poor mother was out of her mind because she thought I had drowned in the sea. Because it's right on a port. And I had disappeared. She was quite beside herself. And there I was, feeling very guilty. I learned from that time on never to disappear. I always let my mother know where I was going because she was beside herself with worry. Well, finally, we got to go on this big ocean liner to New York, to the port of New York. And that boat was so big I can still visualize it. It was pretty little. We got to the boat and I looked up and it looked to me like it was about 100 miles up in the air. It was so huge. The boat, it's an ocean liner. It just looked, I'd never seen anything that big. So we got on the ocean liner and we took off. And all was not well because we were all very seasick. We had a room with bunk beds, but we were so seasick we couldn't eat anything. And somebody gave me an orange. I'd never eaten an orange. And I tried to eat that. And of course it didn't sit very well. I threw up a lot. And when I came to the United States, it took me several years before I could eat an orange. Because every time I smelled an orange, tasted one, it brought back the nausea from that episode. Oh, it was awful. I used to want to eat an orange so badly because everybody ate oranges at that time in Southern California. And I would sit down with a glass of water in an orange section and I would try to take teeny bites and take a big swallow of water. It took me a long time to get over that, but I finally did. The boat was huge. I still like boat whistles. I like the sound of the boat whistle. And I used to climb up to as far as you could go. There was a place to sit. This very much at the top of the boat. There was something there for operating the boat, not for passengers, but there was a bench where I could sit. And I liked sitting up there because I liked the sound of the horn. And I also felt less seasick up there than I did in our home. So anyway, we finally got to New York and we were deposited on a place called Ellis Island. You may have heard of that. That's where all the immigrants were brought to be processed for admission into the United States. And the processing was supposed to weed out people who were unfit or something, like sick or whatever.
Crazy.
Yeah. So you had to go, I remember the hall, the reception hall. It was very big, with lots of long tables. Oh, there you are. And some food, I guess they gave us. But the anxiety part of it was to go through the line where the doctor was examining all of the
Immigrant.
passengers and saying that father happened to be a very sick man. We were very worried that he would not pass through. But I remember they always, every port that we ever went to, they made a special point of examining people's eyes, because there is an infectious disease called trachoma. And if you had trachoma, you couldn't get through. And they could tell that by lifting up your eyelid and seeing only the whites of your eyes. So we were in line, and of course, they looked at your vaccinations. And I had 3 huge vaccinations on my arm. And they look at your eyes to see if you have trachoma. So the doctor looked at my eyes, and he said, "She can't pass." And my mother,
What was wrong with your eyes?
he said they were too big. He was making a joke. And my mother just about passed out. I said, "Oh, God, come on." He thought that was funny. It's not funny. We got through, and we were met by not relatives, but people related to some of my aunts, not my uncles, my part of the family, the aunts. And they met us, and they took us to their home, and they kept us there for several days until what? Until some more money came from my uncles, so that we could get train tickets to come to California, because here we were in New York. We did not intend to remain in New York. We intended to come to California and join the family. And so we did. We got on the train, and I remember that trip because it was pretty fantastic. This train traversed the whole country, and it just went on and on and on, and went through very high mountainous regions, and kept down through tunnels, through all kinds of landscapes. We finally got to Los Angeles, and we were met at the train station by members of the family. And I had 6 uncles and 6 aunts and lots of cousins. And cousins greeted me with bags of candy containing lollipops and chewing gum and other things. If they had put chocolate in, I knew about chocolate, but I didn't know about these other things. And they made me sick. So I hated lollipops and I hated chewing gum for a long time. It took me a while to learn to like those things. And they were very nice to us. And they were very happy to see us. And I had a problem though. What do you suppose that was? I spoke Russian.
Oh, yeah.
That was my problem. I didn't speak English. Or couldn't communicate with children, with my cousins. It was a big problem. And I was kind of shy anyway. That was pretty intimidating. My mother, of course, was very happy to have rediscovered her family that she hadn't seen in many years. And my
Time out
mother
for one
was
sec. Time